and a very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Prateek, and I'll be taking up the News Today discussion for 9th of October. So in the first news, we'll talk about Draft Shram Shakti Niti 2025, which has been released by Ministry of Labor and Employment. So this topic will cover the whole labor ecosystem, what vision the government has for the labor, and what exactly can be done to improve the productivity of the labor ecosystem in the country. The second news is about study reveals decline in India's sunshine hours. So here we'll talk about the concept of solar dimming. We'll understand the concept of aerosol and how does it impact various dimensions of health, etc. And the third news, we'll talk about the Nobel Prize in Chemistry 2025 for a very important discovery of metal and organic framework. Then in the fourth news, we'll talk about AI and the informal workers, a study by Niti Aayog. So here we'll discuss all the major problems faced by the informal workers in the country and what can be done to improve their conditions. Then last, we'll talk about the researchers develop functional eggs from human skin cell, which is a transformative discovery that will have a profound impact on the uh, whole birth system and with respect to fertility. Then we have certain quick updates, and in the place in news, we'll discuss Myanmar. So let us start with the very first news, that is Draft National Labor and Employment Policy or Shram Shakti Niti 2025, recently released by the Ministry of Labor and Employment, and the ministry has sought some opinion from public till October 28, right? So this is a topic that is directly relevant from the perspective of GS paper 3 economy, because it is talking about labor ecosystem, and it also is important from inclusive growth, and from the perspective of GS paper 2 social issues, we need to know about skill development and other areas which are very much important for the overall development of people, right? So here understand that there are several factors of productivity. You have land, you have labor, you have capital, and you have entrepreneurship. But more importantly, what has happened in India's growth process, earlier there was sort of balance between labor and capital. But this balance had sought to be changed now in the favor of capital ever since the 1991 reforms. Because of that, we'll see that there is a growth of inclusive, or even though there is a huge growth in terms of economic progress or GDP, but the same has not translated into gainful employment for a large section of people. As a result of that, we've been seeing jobless growth. Therefore, this policy talks about, or this vision essentially talks about three things. It talks about increasing the productivity, it talks about the protection aspects, and it also talks about the participation of workers. So this is the vision that the government has with respect to the labor ecosystem in the country. And why it is important? It is important because we have a vision of being a developed country by 2047. And it cannot happen unless we have gainful jobs for a large section of people. Because without job, we cannot have gainful employment, and we cannot have better quality of standard of living. It is also aligned with a sustainable development goal number 8. So let us talk about the vision of this. So as per the draft Shram Shakti Niti, it has three measures, or it has three things. First is with respect to protection, second with respect to productivity, and third with respect to participation. So what exactly is the meaning of protection here? So protection here refers to both physical protection, which means that if a worker goes to work in any factory or any industry or anywhere, he or she shall be physically protected from the work environment. So the work environment should be thus created, or so created, that should not be physically problematic for the worker in short term or even in the long term. So there has to be proper ventilation, proper environment with respect to the comfort, etc., should be provided. Apart from the physical protection, it should also provide social protection. and especially social protection for the vulnerable section. Here we need to ensure that women are given special preferences with respect to workforce, because their needs are different and there has been a history of exclusion and exploitation of women at workforce. As a result, our labor force participation rate has declined significantly compared to the OECD country. So we need to have physical protection, and especially with respect to the vulnerable section. Then we need to have social protection. Social protection can include measures like insurance, pension, etc., so that and there it should they should also have proper contract. All these things should be there so that they can function in a proper manner. At the same time, the labor ecosystem should include and should foster productivity. So productivity basically means the number of hours that you are spending to do a job should yield to something productive or substantial outcome. So in the manufacturing age or in the industrial age, that was determined through the number of hours that you were putting in. So mostly it was determined through the number of hours that you are putting in. But in the service age, in the age of AI, it cannot be determined solely on the basis of the number that you are putting it. So it is essential that we need to redefine the concept of productivity, and there has to be some avenues for improving the skill development of the worker. But most of the workers automatically will not start developing skill because it comes at a cost. So here the role of employers become very important so that they can provide some sort of productivity enhancement tools to the workers. And lastly, it is about participation. So participation should be there of every worker in decision making, because they should also have a say in terms of how an industry is to be uh, run, right? So in fact, in Indian constitution, we have a specific article which talks about participation of workers in the management. Now you tell me which specific article which is there in the directive principle of state policy talks about participation of worker in the management. Next, what about the exactly the policy? So it talks about a balanced framework. So what is the balance? What is the balance that is being done at the level of worker on one hand, and also with respect to enterprise to grow, and also sustainability. So they are trying to look into three things at the same time. So this is basically an ecosystem. So ecosystem works in collaboration with various entities. So here it is taking into consideration interest of three entities. One, with respect to the workers welfare. Second, with respect to the enterprises, so that they can innovate, they can grow as well. And third, they should grow but not in an unsustainable manner. It should be sustainable, it should be climate friendly, it should not be exploiting the resources and the livelihood of the people in which they are operating. So these are the guiding principle. So once you understand the guiding principle, it is very easy to deduce what the whole policy will be about. So essentially, the policy can be looked into in terms of a life cycle approach. Okay. So if you look at how a worker gets into any employment, first there is pre-employment measures. So before you get a job, you need to have an avenue where you can find job. For this, there has been initiative with respect to NCS portal, National Career Service Portal, where the employers and employee can be connected together. And here the policy or the Shram Shakti Niti envisages Ministry of Labor and Employment as a facilitator or as a bridge between the employees on one hand and employer on the other hand. So that is the pre-employment. Then during employment, what are some of the concerns? First is with respect to occupational safety and health. So these measures needs to be taken so that minimum condition should be there which will protect the health and safety of workers. So for example, providing enough protective gears and providing conducive environment, ventilation, etc., so that they can work in a harmonious and in a non dangerous manner. Then it is also important that they are skilled properly. So skill development should be there. Then there shall be some sort of protection or protection to the vulnerable section should be there, especially with respect to women, right? Or even the workers who are very young. So their interest should also be taken into account. For example, we have a very stringent guidelines with respect to protection of women, especially there against sexual harassment, which is given under the POSH guidelines, right? So that was basically started or was governed from the Vishakha guidelines by the Supreme Court, under which any company is supposed to have an internal complaints committee once they acquire a certain size, right? So you have protection to vulnerable section. Then after employment, so post employment, what are some of the challenges that a worker face? So first is in terms of portability of your social security. So you have several social security, maybe pension, maybe gratuity, but it is likely that one worker will not merely be confined to one company only. He or she will be migrating throughout his career. So there has to be some way in which the social security measures can be transferred, or it should be portable in nature, right? So there shall be some sort of portability of the social security measures, right? Then we can also talk about some of the measures from the perspective of the employers or from the perspective of the company. So within the perspective of the company, we can talk about measures like having a stable way, or having a unified way of documentation process or governance framework, etc., or ways to provide some skill development, so that the productivity can be enhanced. Along with that, we can also talk about some of the measures to enhance the sustainability of the company through green transition. So these can be some of the initiative that we can talk about the Shram Shakti Niti. So if you look at the specific policies, it is written exactly in the same manner. So within the perspective of the workers or objective of the Shram Shakti policy or Shram Shakti Niti, we have universal and portable social security, where we are going to create universal social security account, which will take into account data from several sets such as EPFO, PM Jan Arogya Yojana and eShram initiative. Then operation safety and health. For that, we will be enforcing the OSH or OSH code of 2020 with risk-based inspection and gender-sensitive standards. Then employment and future readiness can be done by positioning the Ministry of Labor and Employment as an employment facilitator or as a bridge, and leveraging the National Career Service Portal as digital public infrastructure for jobs. Then for women and youth, the labor force participation is expected or is envisaged to be raised to 35% by 2030. Why? Because we want to grow, or we want to get into or achieve women-led development, and this cannot happen unless women do not have equal or some sort of participation in the labor force, right? From the perspective of the organization, these can be the initiative such as ease of compliance and formalization, and this can be done through a single window compliance system with self certification. So without going into some gazetted officer's office and getting that certification, you can do the self certification, and then later it can be verified if it needs to be. Then simplified returns for the MSMEs companies. Then leveraging technology and green transition for sustainable development, and active coherence across institutions, data systems and jurisdiction through a unified labor governed framework. So this is exactly how the objectives will be materialized. So again, this is a draft policy at this level, and the government wants more feedback. So if you have any feedback, you can also provide your feedback to add to this. Now, how this will be executed? For this, there is an institutional and digital architecture. So earlier we talked about the policies and the objectives. Now, in terms of implementation, we need to have certain framework, or we need to have certain bodies that will ensure that the objectives are met. And for that purpose, we have three bodies at national, state and the district level. So at the national level, we have National Labor and Employment Policy Implementation Council, NLPI, which is the apex or the top level of interministerial body that is going to be chaired by the Minister himself of Labor and Employment. Then at the state level, we will have state labor missions to ensure contextual implementation and coordination. At the level of district, there will be District Labor Resource Center, DLRCs, single window hub for worker registration, job matching, skilling, startup, incubation, and grievance redressal. So you can see that majority of the work will be done at the district level, and it will be coordinated at the state level. And for the other coordination and for the policy guidance, we have at the ministry at the national level. So this is all about the first news. And there's a practice question for you. Try to attempt this question. The draft Shram Shakti Niti 2025 envisions a fair, inclusive, and future-ready world of work. Discuss how the policy seeks to reform India's labor governance architecture in line with Viksit Bharat 2047. So you talk about all the objectives and how these objectives will be translated in action through various implemented bodies. Right. So now let us move to the second topic of the day. That is, study reveals decline in India's sunshine hours. And this is important from the perspective of GS Paper 3, Environment. And this study was conducted over a period of 30 years. And it was done by various scientific institutions. And what it found out, that on one hand, we are witnessing global warming. But on the other hand, there is a decline in the sunlight that various countries are receiving. And this was also said in context of India, that because of various anthropogenic emissions, vehicular pollution, we are witnessing what is called as solar dimming. So let us talk about what exactly is the report all about. So if you look at the key findings of the study, first they talk about the trend. So here, in terms of the region which has witnessed the highest or sharpest fall in terms of the sunshine, it is the northern plain or the Indo-Gangetic plain, which has seen the sharpest fall, which is up to 13 hours per year. And with respect to the northeast region, this is the least one. They are largely stable due to regional weather and Tuomi effect. Now this is a very interesting concept, Tuomi effect. So Tuomi effect is nothing but a case where aerosols increase the cloud droplets. So because of that, when the sunlight comes, they reflect it. Okay, so this is sunlight and this is earth. So basically, instead of the sunlight reaching the earth's surface, they are reflected back to the atmosphere. And this effect is called, this reflectivity is called albedo, right? And here, these clouds are basically, some of the clouds are natural clouds and some of the clouds are condensate nuclear particles because of the presence of aerosols, right? So we'll talk about what aerosols are, but because of the aerosols, there is significant diversion of the sunlight, which leads to cooling of the Earth's surface, right? So that is what is called as global dimming or solar dimming, right? And the effect that it produces is called Tuomi effect, right? Now, what are the causes of solar dimming? The causes of solar dimming in the long term is attributed to higher aerosol concentration due to industrial emission. And now this is the reason why you see that at the North Indians or North India has more or higher fall compared to the northeast region, because of the fact that it is more the industrial emissions and the vehicular pollution is more in North India compared to the northeast regions, right? Now, if you look at the aerosol, because aerosol is the primary culprit here, which is in a way increasing the solar dimming, right? So what exactly is aerosol? Aerosols are tiny solid or liquid particles that are suspended in the atmosphere. right? So there are two types of aerosol. There are primary aerosol and there are secondary aerosol. So those aerosol that are created or directly emitted, they are called as primary aerosol, and they can be sea spray, dust, smoke, and volcanic ash. So they come and they are from the primary sources. That is why they are called primary aerosol. Then there are secondary aerosol, which are not the primary sources, but they are formed from a chemical reaction or secondary sources. So they are formed from gases through chemical reaction. This includes sulfates from industrial emissions or through biomass burning, right? Or even through the use of vehicular vehicles, you can get the secondary aerosol. Now, what is the impact of aerosol? So we can discuss this under four heading. One, with respect to climate and weather. So it scatters or absorbs sunlight, influencing the local cooling or warming. So depending on the aerosol, you have uh, the aerosol sometimes can reflect the sunlight, that leads to the cooling, and when the aerosol absorb sunlight, then it leads to warming, right? So affecting cloud formation, monsoon patterns, and rainfall distribution, because it leads to to problems or differences in the heat distribution. Secondly, it also has a tremendous and a very debilitating impact with respect to health, because these are fine particles and they cause lung irritation and respiratory damage, cardiovascular disease, and it can lead to premature death as well. Then, with respect to ecology, the mineral dust delivers nutrients that affect the ecosystem, like the Amazon rainforest fertilization, and it can create ocean phytoplankton blooms as well, right? Then, lastly, with respect to solar power, aerosols reduce sunlight reaching the solar power. So in a way, it lowers energy output. So we can say that because of aerosol, it can also impact not just the energy security, but it can also impact our green transition objectives. And secondly, it can also have an impact on agriculture, right? Because agriculture is also a lot dependent on the sunlight or the availability of the sunlight throughout the year, right? So this can be considered as some of the impact of aerosol, right? In terms of a practice question, you can take a look at this. The decline in the sunshine hours, SSH, in India reflects a hidden dimension of air pollution. So this can also be considered as a hidden dimension of air pollution. Solar dimming. Discuss the implication of this trend for agriculture and renewable energy generation in India. So the important thing is that we understand the concept in their isolation, and then we try to link it to a broader objective, for example, agriculture, for example, energy transition, etc. And also we can add it to health and with respect to climate change as well. So this essentially is talking about the implication on only two things, but we can also have a question that talks about the overall implication, right? So now let's move to the third important topic of the day, that is Nobel Prize in Chemistry has been announced for the year 2025, and this is recently given to Susumu Kitagawa, Richard Robson, and Omar Yaghi for their role in development of Metal Organic Framework, or MOF, right? Of course, this is part of GS paper 3, Science and Technology. So here what we need to understand is the application part. Why exactly is this matters first, and secondly, what is their day-to-day application, and we also need to understand the science behind this, right? So what exactly is the basic science or scientific principle involved in the functioning of this discovery, right? So as the name suggests, it talks about metal organic framework. So framework essentially means structure of something. So here there are two things involved. One is metal, second is organic. Organic basically means compounds that are created from carbon. Okay. So generally the molecules would want to or the atoms would want to combine with each other, or will want to be part of some sort of some bond, atomic bonds, because of the fact that they want to get into stable situation, and for that purpose they need to have 8 electrons in their outer shell, right? And for that, those atoms which have excess of 4 electrons or maybe 6 electrons, they tend to get more electrons so that they complete 8 electrons. And those which have, let's say, 2 electrons, they tend to lose out on that front, right? So the fact remains that if we combine atoms of different molecules, there can be different compounds that could be formed. And this is exactly what Mr. Richard Robson started doing with, right? So what he did was he created a compound or form of molecular architecture, which essentially was a combination of metals like zinc or and then it was also with respect to carbon, right? So it was essentially about metal ions and combination. So metal ions were there and then it was combined with carbon. So in a way it formulated a 3D structure, but at the same time they also had several spaces as well, right? So in that space a lot of things could be done, right? And that space was like a hidden space, just like if you have seen or read the Harry Potter series, Hermione Granger had a purse where a lot of things could be stored, right? So it is exactly like that. So in this molecular architecture there are several tiny structure, or there are several space that were hidden, in which even 1 gram can have an internal surface area compared to a football ground, right? Then these pores, they trap, they separate or transport gases, ions and molecules, right? So in this structure a lot of things can happen. They can get, or they can release water in the desert, or they can have ripening impact on the fruits, or there can be a lot of things that could be done in terms of the uh, metal organic framework, right? So what are some of the applications which is important from the exam perspective? So we have discussed the basic or a layman understanding of the principle through which they work. So in terms of the application, first, they can be very useful for water harvesting. So MOFs can capture water vapor from desert during the night, and it can release it potable water in the morning heat. Second, they can be very excellent tool for removing pollutants. They can filter out harmful substances and catalyze the decomposition of crude oil and antibiotics in polluted water. They also have industrial application where they can be used for mining the rare earth elements from wastewater. Very extremely important development here. They can store hydrogen and capture carbon dioxide. Healthcare, they are providing instrumental in delivering pharmaceuticals in the body, managing extremely toxic gases, and encapsulate enzymes that break down traces of antibiotics in the environment. So they have a plethora of applications ranging from healthcare to water conservation to sustainable development and a lot more. So that they definitely deserve to get the Nobel Prize. Now take a look at this question and tell me what would be the right answer. Please read the question very carefully and then tell me. So if you have got the answer as B, you are wrong. It is not B, it is D. Why? Because the question is not about Nobel Prize in 2025, it is about 2024. Okay. Next, let's move to the next topic, that is Niti Aayog unveils groundbreaking roadmap on AI for inclusive societal development. Again, it will be part of GS paper 3, inclusive growth, and from the GS2 perspective it will be part of social justice. Now why this study is very different is because all across the world major emphasis is on the impact of AI on the white collar jobs, right? And very few studies have done the impact of AI on the informal workers. Now, in India, this becomes very important because if you look at the composition of workers in India, around 490 or around, 490 million informal workers are there in the country, which basically constitute around 50% of the workforce, right, of the GDP. But they lack formal protection. So the question arises, what would happen with the advent and the acceleration and adoption of AI on the informal workplace or workers? Would their condition deteriorate, and what could be some of the ways to ensure their protection? So first, let's talk about what are informal workers and what is their current status. So informal status or informal workers are those workers, they are not formally recognized as such, and they do not have any social protection like pension, like insurance, etc. So they basically work on day to day basis, and if they do not, or if they do not have a proper contract at their hand, so they can be exploited by their employees and employers, and they can also be made to work in a very harsh environment and can be paid very little. And they can be made to work on excess of their hours as well. So they work in very exploitative condition, right? But there are certain importance of informal workers if you look at it. So they are the largest employment section. So the informal work generates 90% of the country's labor force. So the informal workers can be considered to be the carpenters, plumbers, electricians, health workers, etc., can be considered as the labor or the informal labors, but they are characterized by low productivity. So Niti Aayog has mentioned that their per hour rate is as low as $5, which is half of the overall average worldwide. Then, in terms of social security, they are characterized by gaps in social security coverage, where it is only reaching to the 48% of the informal workers. So, generally, they are characterized, the informal workers, when you talk about informal workers, it means that they do not have adequate social safeguards, but some of them do have some social safeguard. But if you look at statistical data, it is saying that they're only 48% of the informal workers have some sort of social security net. Then what are the challenges faced? So first is with respect to financial fragility, with respect to irregular wages. So generally the formal workers get paid after the end of month, right? But the informal workers, their salaries are delayed. They do not know when they are going to get their salaries, and sometimes it may happen that it is done, or it is dependent on the number of tasks that they are doing. For example, the gig workers, so depending on the number of deliveries that they are providing, or if one is a carpenter, then number of work or projects that one has worked in, that would determine the wages. So there is irregularity in the wages. Then delays, definitely there is no fixed time in which they get paid. There's several delays, right? Then there is no contract with the employer, so the employer can increase the number of hours, employer can reduce the pay, or employer can give more work, right, without any compensation for the or for oversight or overtime. So this is again a very problematic thing. Then there is lack of timely access to benefits, right? Second, there is issue with market access and demand linkages. So the job access is fragmented. So here Niti Aayog has given several examples of people from different informal sectors such as carpenter, plumber, etc. So what it mentioned is that if a carpenter is working in a city, say Patna, so he will have access to only localized level of demand. He will not get to know what kind of demand is there in other parts of the state, or maybe even other parts of the area where he is living. Also, there is not verified identities, so he does not know where to go and search for opportunities. And he also does not have proper platform visibility, because he does not have the required digital skills to properly use several of the initiatives undertaken by government, such as even NCS portal. Then the third important challenge that the informal workers face is with respect to skilling and adoption. So there are outdated methods, no formal training. In fact, only 2 to 5% workers have vocational training, right? So here in this regard, recently the government has initiated PM Setu, right? So tell me, what exactly is the objective of PM Setu initiative? right? Then there is missing worker data, social protection and occupational safety. There's no safety standard, health insurance, pension, or accidental compensation. So for very few workers, this is done. Productivity gaps, manual workflows, limited mechanization, no digital tools. So these are the characteristics of the informal workers in India. So in this respect, the Niti Aayog has provided some suggestions. What are these suggestions? So first is very important one, that is Mission Digital Shram Setu. So under this, a national mission is to be done or created to empower the informal workers. How? Through AI, artificial intelligence, to ensure a future ready labor force. And this will be done through inclusive AI infrastructure, which means that the use of AI should not just be limited to those who have access to infrastructure. So a lot of people are not able to use internet or technology because they do not know how to type or read messages. For that purpose, there shall be emphasis on developing multilingual voice first AI tools to overcome literacy and language barriers. Then there shall be multi stakeholder engagement. So, again, this point is emphasized again and again by all the reports that is published by the government. And here there are two perspectives: whole of government approach and whole of society approach. So, implementation should be localized, localize the implementation via states and community networks. So here a very important example is with respect to Kerala, where they were able to achieve full functional literacy in digital domain because of the participation of community and because of the participation of the SHGs like Kudumbashri, right? So this model can be replicated across all the states. That would help in early adoption and strengthening of skilling with respect to AI. Then leverage the existing data or digital schemes, integrate AI with platforms like eShram and Udyam for enhanced delivery. You tell me what exactly is the function of Udyam, right? So, what exactly is the way in which informal livelihood can be transformed through AI? So, first is that there can be smart contract, which will be automated, transparent wage dispersal. Then, digital credential, so the employer will understand who they are hiring. So, there will be some sort of history of their work, and they can also get some feedback in terms of their productivity. Then, trust deficit can be overcome through verifiable credentials to ensure timely access to benefits. So they can not deny benefits for the simple reason that they do not have credentials. Then smart wearables, reducing physical strain, improving capacity, and personalized learning through AI driven skill development for workers, and precision farming. So AI IoT for optimized farm management, precision farming, ensuring that the irrigation is done properly, etc. That can be done through AI. Next news: researchers develop functional eggs from human skin cells. And this is part of GS paper 3, science and technology, and a very important development as far as uh, infertility is concerned, and the fact that several people are not able to conceive because of genetic disorder. So this breakthrough can help them through, and it can have several implications. So when it comes to the research, what did the scientists do? So they managed to create an egg like human cells, and that was done from a human skin cell, right? So this is a big step forward in treating infertility because it shows that the human eggs might one day be made in the lab without needing to retrieve them from ovaries. So ovaries basically house the eggs, but here what has been done is that human skin has been used to create eggs. Now, this is basically part of IVG. You may have heard about IVF, that is in vitro fertilization. But this is IVG, that is in vitro gametogenesis. Gametogenesis, which basically means making eggs. So, making eggs or sperms outside the body in a laboratory using a person's own genetic material. It is like artificially growing the reproductive cells that are called as gametes that can be used for fertilization. Okay, so the important aspect of this is that now people who are not just heterosexual couples but homosexual couples can also have their children that are connected to them genetically, right? Then what is the process that they used? First, they start with a skin cell. This is the thing. First is nucleus from a skin cell placed inside a donor egg that had its genetic information taken out, right? So the donor egg with nucleus was removed. So nucleus basically houses all the important properties of a cell. That was removed. Then half of the 23 pairs of chromosomes removed. That was to mimic the egg development. So egg with a single set of chromosome, and then the sperm was fertilized. That led to, so that half of its chromosome came from each parent, right? So here first is what is the process? First start with the skin cell, then transfer its nucleus, and this step is called as somatic cell nuclear transfer, as CNT. The same process was used to clone Dolly the sheep, right? Now the challenge is the human eggs and sperm must have a 23 chromosome, not 46. So therefore this is the removal done to remove half of the chromosome to make the cell behave like a natural egg which has 23 chromosome from each parent. Okay, now the key innovation here is mitomeiosis. So you may have heard about the term mitosis and meiosis. So in general the cell transfer happen through mitosis, right? But meiosis happens when it comes to the gametes or with respect to sperm cells or the egg cells, right? So here there is a combination of both mitosis and meiosis, right? Which they are calling mitomeiosis, right? It mimics the natural reproduction process that happens when eggs or sperm are made in the body, exactly the same process. This ensures that only 23 chromosomes remain, making the lab made cell capable of being fertilized. Now why it is important? So there is one thing which is the science part, understanding the process. The other part is the application of this technology, which is more important from the perspective of exam. So here it could eventually help people who cannot produce egg or sperm naturally, right? So it is not going to help only those who cannot produce egg naturally, but also those who cannot produce sperm naturally, because the same technology can be applied for sperm as well, right? Secondly, it opened doors for studying early human development and genetic diseases. At the same time, this can also be used for providing children to the homosexual couples as well in a genetic way, so that the child is genetically linked to them as well. But there are certain concerns as well, such as these are the egg-like cells, not fully functional eggs used in the pregnancy. So again, a lot of things have to be ironed out before this becomes mainstream. Secondly, there are ethical, safety, and legal concerns before this method can be used in humans, right? So again, these are some of the concerns related to this development. Now let us talk about the place in news, where we have Myanmar in news, where Myanmar military dropped bombs on protesters, killing more than 25 people. In fact, some reports suggest that more than 40 people have died. Now understand the context. Since 2021, there has been a civil war in which, or it was propelled because the military has overtaken the government or power in the state of Myanmar, and it has suspended democracy. It has captured the Democrats or the political leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi. So they are now in captivity. And this happened, or this recent event happened, because there was a Buddhist festival that was to be celebrated, and people gathered in a large number to celebrate that Buddhist festival. But within that festival, people started to develop the call for more reforms and for certain uh, measures to release the political prisoners, right? Because in December 2025, election is scheduled in Myanmar. So election cannot be conducted fairly unless there is release of the political prisoner. Because of that, Myanmar, or the military of Myanmar, took a very harsh step on its own people by dropping bombs on them, killing several people. right? So if you look at the features or the political features or the mapping of Myanmar, what is important is the location. It is part of the western Southeast Asia. And what are the bordering nations? You have China in the north, Laos in the east, China, Laos. Then you have Thailand, Bangladesh, and Bangladesh towards the south. Okay, sorry, Bangladesh here towards the east, and sorry, west. Bangladesh towards the west, and India towards the northwest. Okay, so these are the countries with which Myanmar is situated. Now, from the perspective of India, tell me which Indian states touch their boundary with Myanmar. Secondly, there was a recent measure undertaken by the Ministry of Home Affairs, which has also led to some tension in India Myanmar relation. Can you tell me which measure I'm talking about? Then, with respect to geographical feature, it has mountain ranges like Rakhine Mountains, Shan Plateau, Dawana Range, and other mountains. The highest point is this Mount Cabo Razi, and rivers are Irrawaddy, Chindwin, Sitagang, Salwin, Yangon River, etc. Right. So this is about the place in news. Now let us discuss quick updates. In the quick update, the first news is on snow leopard. And why it was in news? Because recently there has been a study done which has suggested that the snow leopards have very low genetic diversity. As a result of that, it is very much prone to extinction, and essentially it is going to be persistently small population size throughout their evolutionary history rather than recent inbreeding, right? So because earlier it was considered that because of the inbreeding their population size has declined, but the fact of the matter is it is because of the fact that they have very little genetic diversity, that is why their population is less. And the some of these researchers have also speculated that in case the genetic diversity even fragments further, it can lead to the decline or the decimation of the snow leopard, right? So when you talk about the snow leopard, what is important is their geographical spread, which they are flagship species in the mountainous region of South and Central Asia, spanning 12 countries. Within India, they are found in the mountainous states of Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, or the UT of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, then Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand in Western Himalayas, and Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh in Eastern Himalayas, right? Then what is the conservation status? They are vulnerable as far as IUCN Red List is concerned, and within the WPN 1972, they are categorized as Schedule 1 species, right? And they are the state animal of Ladakh and Himachal Pradesh. And some of the characteristics are they do not roar, they are solitary animals, they are mostly active at dawn and dusk. Okay. Second news is about electronic bank guarantees, EBGs. So what has recently happened? Has been a memoranda of agreement between two agencies, government agencies. First is National E-Governance Division. The second one is National E-Governance Services Limited. They have signed an MOU to integrate the digital document execution for e-backgrounds, right? Background guarantees, right? So, what is a bank guarantee? It's a financial instrument from a bank promising to pay a third party, that is the beneficiary, if their customer fails to fulfill a contractual obligation, right? So, basically, if you take a loan from some bank, then there is some sort of a bank guarantee is to be provided to the person who is providing or giving you the loan, so that in case the person who is taking the loan defaults, then the person who's providing the loan do not lose out on their money, right? So earlier it was done through mechanized manner, but now it is done through digital manner. Now what exactly is going to be the benefit of this? It is going to eliminate the physical documentation process, which is usually associated with issuance of BG. Then it reduces the turnaround time of the BG issuance and delivery. So in a way, it is going to increase or speed up the process of loan provision. Third, Agri Annex program. So recently, Ministry of Information Technology and Electronics announced the transfer of technology under the Agri Annex program. So Agri-NX program essentially is a combination of two words, agriculture and electronics. So by combining these two words, we get Agri-NX, right? So here, what exactly happens with respect to this? So essentially, it is about transfer of technology. Transfer of technology to where? To the agricultural sector. What kind of technology transfer? In terms of research, development, deployment, demonstration, and commercialization, right? In agriculture and environment domain both. So it is being implemented by what agency? CDAC, that is Center for Development of Advanced Computing, Kolkata, as the nodal agency, right? Next topic is Great Green Wall Initiative. So recently it was in news that Great Green Wall project is facing several or significant challenges in Africa. So we need to know about this initiative. So what was the initiative about? It was launched in 2007 by the African Union, and the objective was to restore 100 million hectares of currently degraded land, sequester 250 million tons of carbon, and create 10 million green jobs by 2030. So essentially, it was a project that sought to plant trees and to ensure that it is done in a sustainable manner. Along with that, it would create jobs as well. So the aim was to increase the amount of arable land, that is the land that could be fit for agriculture in the Sahel region, the region bordering Africa's Sahara Desert. So this is the Sahel region. All these which are in the green are basically the Sahel region, right? So the problem here is in Africa, especially in the Sahel region, is that it is very much deprived of various of irrigation, right? So in a way, what happens is that Africa, despite the potential of producing food security or agriculture, it continues to export a lot or import a lot of food from rest of the world. So this initiative was done, Great Green Wall initiative was done to ensure that Africa becomes Atmanirbhar or self-sufficient when it comes to food security. But because of several challenges like fund issues with respect to implementation issues, it is facing several challenges, right? So this can be a very important solution for climate change, for drought, famine, conflict, and migration, apart from the food security issues. Next is Global Electricity Mid-Year Insights 2025. So according to some think tank, energy think tank Embers report, in the first half of 2025, the renewable energy has overtook coal to become the largest source of electricity globally. And the good thing is that even India is mirroring this trend. So if you look at the total global potential in India, or the electricity produced in India, almost 50% of the electricity is coming from the renewable sector or renewable energy areas. So among the major economies, fossil fuel generation decreased in China and India, where clean generation has outpaced demand growth. Emissions: despite global electricity demand rising by 2.6%, emissions fall in China and India, while it has increased in EU and US, right? So in terms of clean energy growth in India, solar and wind set record growth, pushing clean energy share higher, right? So in terms of the benefits, we have seen these things, but in terms of challenges, there are two major challenges. One is with respect to providing some sort of grid stability, right? Because uh, in times when there is fluctuation in energy supply, especially during night or during cloudy weather, there has to be some sort of way in which grid can be stabilized, the renewable energy grid can be stabilized. Second, there is problem with respect to discoms in terms of distribution, because it is crippled with corruption with respect to the AT&C losses. So these are some of the challenges that need to be overcome. Next is PM Kusum initiative, that is Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Utthan Maha Abhiyan. Now, this initiative is going to be undertaken by International Solar Alliance and to be replicated across various developing countries, right? So India is, as per this, India is set to scale up its flagship program and replicate its success across developing nation. So this can be considered as a very good example of South-South cooperation. Okay. So what is the ministry which is responsible for the implementation? That is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. It was launched in 2019 to provide energy and water security to farmers, dieselize farm sector, and reduce environmental pollution. So these were the major objectives. Target was to add solar capacity of about 34,800 MW megawatt by March 2026. And these are the components. So first is with respect to solar capacity, increasing the solar capacity through small solar power plants. Then B is to install standalone solar agricultural pumps. Third is with respect to the solarization of grid connected agriculture. So not only creating a grid connected agriculture or agriculture pumps, but also the standalone the agriculture pumps should also be solarized, right? So basically ensuring that the farm sector or the agriculture is not using diesel but using solar, right? So that was the initial, or that was the prime focus of this initiative. Then the last news for today, that is Plutonium Management and Disposition Agreement, PMDA. Why this was in news? Because Russia's lower house has approved withdrawal from this initiative with the US. So this was in news in 2016 as well, because earlier Russia's executive body has taken the decision to suspend the implementation of this agreement, telling that it is because of US sanction. But now this has also been done under the legislative, or it has also been given or ratified by the Russian parliament as well. So what exactly is PMDA? It is an agreement signed in 2000 that commits the two countries, US and Russia, to each irreversibly dispose of at least 34 metric tons of weapons grade plutonium. So plutonium, which has an atomic number 94, is a radioactive material with a high melting point and is the heaviest naturally occurring element. So this fact is important. It can be asked as part of a linking static statement from this topic. And what was the disposition goal? Convert plutonium into safer norm, that is MOX fuel or reactor irradiation, right? So apart from that, there has been other agreements also where Russia and US had pulled out from. Now you can tell me about 2-3 initiatives from where Russia and US have pulled out, right? So this is all about the news today for 9th October. Do attempt the questions and provide the solution in the comment section. Thank you so much and all the best.